The air in Cook County Circuit Court smells like burnt coffee and cheap perfume. I leaned against the chipped laminate of the prosecutor's table, pretending to study the motions in front of me across the aisle. Marcus Thorne was whispering to someone, not his paralegal. My wife, Elena Vance, my wife of 8 years, the woman who stole the blanket every night and left her reading glasses on my side of the bed. She stood there in an ice blue Armani pantsuit, the one I bought her last Christmas at Barney's on Michigan Avenue. Her dark hair was pulled back in that severe bun she reserves for high-stakes divorces. Only we weren't in a domestic relations hearing. We were in a felony courtroom. You're supposed to be in motion hour at the Daily Center, I said, keeping my voice low enough that only they could hear. Marcus grinned, flashing those 2 white veneers. Change of plans. Julian, Elena's got something the state needs to hear. Elena didn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the docket sheet. Logan needs a character witness. Julian, it's pro bono. Bullshit. I muttered. Since when do you do pro bono for eco-terrorists? Logan Pierce. Her first love. The guy from her undergrad days at Northwestern who thought burning flags was a form of political discourse. He was currently sitting at the defense table, looking like a fallen folk hero with his messy blonde hair and a beard that probably housed half the vermin in the Cook County Jail. He was charged with aggravated arson for torching that luxury development in Lincoln Park last month. If he went down, he was looking at 15 to 30. The bailiff called the case. People v. Pierce. Marcus stood up. The people call Elena Vance to the stand. I felt a cold knot form in my gut. I pushed off the table. Objection. Your Honor. Lack of foundation. And spousal privilege. Judge Patricia Geller, a no-nonsense woman from the South Side who hates lawyers almost as much as she hates excuses, peered down at me over her bifocals. Mr. Vance, spousal privilege prevents you from testifying against your spouse, not the other way around. Besides, Mrs. Vance isn't your client. She's a witness. Approach. We stepped forward. The wood of the bench smelled like lemon oil and old paper. Julian, Elena whispered, finally looking at me. Her brown eyes were hard. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder? I kept my voice steady. Professional. You're about to perjure yourself for a guy who thinks deodorant is a corporate conspiracy. How is that not hard? Marcus leaned in. Back off. Vance. She's got a right to tell the truth. The truth? I scoffed. You mean the truth according to Logan Pierce? What's he got on you? Elena? Or is this still about that weekend in Door County 20 years ago? Elena's jaw tightened. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I wish to testify. Geller nodded. Swear her in. The clerk administered the oath. Elena placed her hand on the Bible, my grandmother's Bible, the one I keep in my briefcase for clients who need the theatrics. She said, I do, without a hint of hesitation. She took the stand. Marcus started soft. Ms. Vance, where were you on the evening of October 12th? Elena shifted in her seat, crossing her legs. The ice blue suit caught the fluorescent light. I was at home in Winnetka with my husband, Julian. I closed my eyes for a second. Here we go. And what time did you and your husband retire for the evening? We went to bed around 10:30, she said. But around 11, Julian received a phone call. He left the house. Said there was an emergency at his office downtown. Marcus paused for effect. And did you see Mr. Pierce that night? Ms. Vance? I held my breath. This was the pivot. This was a lie. Elena looked directly at the jury, 12 pairs of eyes hanging on her every word. Then she looked at Logan. Her expression softened for just a split second after Julian left. I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to make some tea. Through the kitchen window, I saw Logan Pierce's car parked across the street. He was just sitting there. He looked distressed. Objection. I was on my feet before I realized it. Calls for speculation. And relevance? Sustained. Geller said, stick to what you observed. Mrs. Vance. Marcus cleared his throat. Did you speak to Mr. Pierce that night? No. Elena said, but his presence explains why he wasn't at the construction site in Lincoln Park. He was in our neighborhood. He was upset about a personal matter. He wouldn't have had time to drive downtown and set a fire. The jury ate it up. They loved the distraught ex-boyfriend angle. They hated developers. Everyone in Chicago hates developers. Logan was a hero to them already. I sat down, my mind racing. I hadn't left the house at 11. I'd been up working on a discovery motion for a client named Petrov. I had the browser history, the saved drafts, the half-empty glass of Macallan on my desk to prove it. But if I brought that up, I'd be impeaching my own wife. I'd be the asshole husband who calls his wife a liar in open court. Marcus finished his direct examination, passed the witness. I stood up. My legs felt like lead. I walked toward the lectern, adjusting the microphone. I didn't look at Elena. I looked at the jury. Mrs. Vance, I began, my voice flat. You mentioned my phone call at 11 p.m. Did you happen to check the caller ID? Elena blinked. No, you were already reaching for it. Convenient. I said, so, you didn't see who called. You just heard me say there was an emergency. I heard you. She insisted. Did you hear me dial a number? Or did I just pick up the phone and walk out? You picked up the phone. So, for all you know, I could have been talking to myself. Marcus jumped up. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. Move along. Mr. Vance. I turned back to Elena. You said you saw Mr. Pierce's car. Describe it for me. It was a dark green Subaru Outback. She said quickly. Too quickly. I smiled. A cold, thin smile. Interesting, because the arrest report, which you helped prepare as a consulting attorney for Mr. Pierce's defense fund, lists the suspect vehicle as a black Ford F-150. Are you suggesting Mr. Pierce has mastered the art of vehicular shape-shifting? Mrs. Vance? Or perhaps you're recalling a different night, a night when you and Mr. Pierce were actually together? The color drained from her face. It was dark. I could have been mistaken about the model. Mistaken. I repeated. I walked closer to the stand. You're a top-tier matrimonial attorney. Hélène, your entire career is built on noticing discrepancies in financial ledgers and timeline inconsistencies. You once caught a husband lying about an affair because he wore cologne on a Tuesday when he claimed he went to the gym. But tonight, you can't tell the difference between a Subaru and a Ford? Between green and black? Objection, Marcus shouted. Badgering. Overruled, Geller said, watching Elena with narrowed eyes. I pressed on. You said Mr. Pierce looked distressed. How far away was the car? Across the street. 50 yards? 60? And you could discern his emotional state from 50 yards away in the dark? Did he wave at you? Elena, did you wave back? No. She snapped. I just saw him. Through the kitchen window. I clarified. Which faces east. On October 12th. The moon was in its waning crescent phase. Less than 5% illumination. Are you telling this court that you have superior night vision, Mrs. Vance? Or are you telling us that you were expecting to see him there? Marcus was on his feet again. Your Honor, this is harassment. She's a witness, not a defendant. Your Honor, I said, turning to Geller. The witness is offering testimony that places my credibility, and by extension, my professional standing, into question. I have a right to explore the basis of her observations. Geller sighed. Mr. Vance, wrap it up. I turned back to Elena. She was staring at her hands now, twisting her wedding ring. The diamond caught the light. Our 10th anniversary was next month. I'd already booked a trip to Santorini. Mrs. Vance, I said, softening my tone just enough to sound dangerous. You're under oath. You testified that I left the house at 11 p.m. Let's assume, for a moment, that I did. That gives me exactly 47 minutes to drive from Winnetka to the Loop, access a secure construction site, procure accelerants, set a fire that burned for 20 minutes before the first alarm, and then drive back to Winnetka without a single dash cam, toll booth, or eyewitness placing me south of Evanston. Does that sound like a plausible timeline to you? She didn't answer. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Answer the question. Mrs. Vance. It sounds tight. She whispered. Tight. I echoed. Or impossible. Like seeing a green Subaru that was actually a black truck? Like seeing a man in distress who was actually miles away? Marcus stood. Your Honor, I move to strike the witness's testimony as non-responsive. Denied. Geller said. The witness will answer. Elena looked at Logan. He gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. A warning. Don't you dare fold. I saw it. Of course I saw it. Mrs. Vance, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. So the jury had to lean in. Who are you protecting? Your husband? Or the man who broke your heart when you were 19 and has been breaking it ever since? Objection. Marcus yelled. Sustained. Mr. Vance, that's enough. I ignored him. I looked at Elena. You used to tell me that the law was a blade. You either cut with it, or it cuts you. Today, Elena, you tried to cut me, but you forgot to check which way the blade was facing. I turned and walked back to my seat. Without waiting for the judge to dismiss her, I could feel the heat of Elena's glare on my back. I could feel the satisfaction of Marcus Thorne, who finally had the ammunition he needed to bury me. But as I sat down, I caught Elena's I won last time. She wasn't looking at me with hate. She was looking at me with fear, because she knew, as surely as I knew, that I wasn't done. I had just shown the court that she was a liar. Now, I was going to show them why. The judge dismissed the jury for a recess. As they filed out, Elena stood up from the witness box. Her knees buckled slightly. Marcus rushed to her side, but she shrugged him off. She walked down the aisle, her heels clicking on the linoleum. When she reached the bar, she stopped. You think you won, she whispered, leaning over the rail. I think you lost. I replied, not looking up from my notes. You just don't know it yet. She leaned closer. Her perfume, Chanel No. 5, washed over me. Logan didn't do it. Julian, I know he didn't. And if you try to destroy him, I will destroy you. I'll tell him everything. About the Petrov case. About the money you moved for him in the Caymans. I have the files. I finally looked up. I smiled. It was the same smile I give juries right before I go to witness. Elena, honey, if you had those files, you would have used them already. You're bluffing, and you're a terrible poker player. Her eyes widened. For a second, the Ice Queen facade cracked, revealing the scared girl from 20 years ago. Then it was gone. She straightened up, smoothed her jacket, and walked out of the courtroom. Marcus stood behind me. That was quite a show. Vance, but you just made an enemy out of your wife. In Chicago, that's a bad move. I stood up, gathering my files. Marcus, in Chicago, the only thing worse than having an enemy is having a wife who lies for her ex-boyfriend. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a discovery request to file. One that involves tracing every penny that's moved between Elena Rossi and Logan Pierce since 2014. I walked out of the courtroom, leaving Marcus staring after me. The hallway was chaos. Cops, lawyers, defendants chained together. But all I could hear was the echo of Elena's lie. And all I could think about was the look on Logan Pierce's face when I dragged his name through the mud right alongside hers. The war had started, and in this family, there are no truces. I filed a motion before the ink on the court reporter's transcript dried. Motion to compel production of financial records. Broad, aggressive, the kind of filing that makes paralegals groan and judges reach for the aspirin. I didn't just want Elena's bank statements. I wanted every 1099, every K1, every shell company she'd ever whispered into existence. Marcus Thorne fought it. Obviously, he stood in front of Judge Geller the next morning, waving a stapled stack of objections. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition. Mr. Vance is using the discovery process to harass his wife and intimidate a witness. Geller didn't even look up from her coffee. Sit down. Marcus, Julian, you got 5 minutes to explain why I shouldn't sanction you for burying this court in paper. I stepped forward. Your Honor, Mrs. Vance offered testimony that directly implicates her in the timeline of this alleged arson. If she's moving money for Mr. Pierce or anyone else connected to this case, the jury deserves to know. Rule 404B allows evidence of other acts to show intent, preparation, or absence of mistake. Her financial dealings are relevant to her credibility. Credibility. Marcus scoffed. He's trying to paint her as a mobster. She's the one who took the stand. I said, keeping my eyes on Geller, not me. And when she lied about the Subaru, she opened the door to every transaction she's ever made. Geller sighed. Granted, limited to the past 3 years. And Julian, keep it professional. I don't want to see you playing divorce lawyer in my felony court. Understood? Understood. Judge. I walked out of the chambers. And Elena was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall. She looked tired. The ice blue suit was gone, replaced by a charcoal gray sheet that made her look like a funeral director. You're digging into my life, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm following the money. I corrected. It always leads home. You think you'll find something? You won't. I'm meticulous. Julian, you taught me that. I stopped in front of her. You were meticulous until Logan Pierce showed up. Now you're sloppy. You confuse a Ford with a Subaru. You forgot the moon phase. You're so busy looking at him that you're tripping over your own lies. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Leave him out of this. This is between us. This is about him. I said, it's always been about him. Why? Elena? Why risk everything for a guy who lives in a yurt and thinks soap is toxic? She flinched. He's not like you. He's not cold. He's not calculating. Cold? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm not the one committing perjury to cover for a guy who probably set that fire to collect insurance money for his failing nonprofit. Her eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're talking about. Then enlighten me. I challenged. Tell me the truth. Tell me why you're really doing this. And maybe I'll back off. She stared at me for a long beat. Then she smiled. It was a cold, empty smile. You want the truth? Fine. Logan is the father of the child I miscarried in law school. Happy now? I owe him. I owe him for that life. And I'm not going to let you or Marcus Thorne or this corrupt system take the only person who ever actually loved me. She turned and walked away before I could respond. I stood there, the words hitting me like a physical blow. A miscarriage. She'd never told me. We'd talk about kids. She'd always said she wasn't ready. But Logan? She'd lost his kid? I shook it off. It didn't change the facts. It didn't change the lie on the stand, but it explained the desperation in her eyes. Back at my office on LaSalle Street, I called my investigator, Ray Ortega. Ray was a former Chicago PD detective who knew where all the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. Ray, I need a deep dive on Logan Pierce and Elena Vance, specifically any financial ties between them, offshore accounts, shell companies, crypto wallets, anything that smells like a bribe or a payoff. Ray grunted. You sure you want to do this? Julian, she's your wife. She stopped being my wife when she decided to be his alibi. I said, find me the money. Ray, that's all I care about. 3 days later, Ray dropped a manila envelope on my desk. You're not going to like this. I opened it. Bank statements. Wire transfers. Dozens of them. All originating from an account under the name Rossi Holdings, LLC. All deposited into an account belonging to Green Future Now, Logan's nonprofit. 200 grand, Ray said, leaning against the filing cabinet, over the last 6 months. Every transfer happened 2 days after Rossi Holdings got a wire from a firm in the Caymans. I haven't traced the source yet, but it's dirty. Julian, real dirty. I flipped through the pages. She's laundering money for him. Looks like it. And there's more. Ray tossed another document onto the pile. A copy of a promissory note, dated 10 years ago, signed by Logan Pierce, payable to Elena Rossi. Amount, $250. 000. Interest, 0%. Due on demand. I stared at the signature. Logan's scrawl was unmistakable. $250,000. Where did she get that kind of cash in her 3rd year of practice? Student loans? Inheritance? I checked the Rossi family. Her old man died broke. Her mom's on Medicaid. This didn't come from family. I picked up the note. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind you buy at a stationery store in the Gold Coast. She loaned him money 10 years ago, and now she's paying his legal bills and laundering his bribes? Seems like it. And if he goes down for arson and insurance fraud, the feds will follow the money. They'll find Rossi Holdings. They'll find Elena. She's not just protecting him. Julian, she's protecting herself. I leaned back in my chair. The pieces clicked into place. The miscarriage story was a distraction, a sob story to hide the fact that she was financially entangled with a criminal. She wasn't a savior. She was his partner. Get me everything on Rossi Holdings. I said, articles of incorporation, registered agent, tax filings. And I want a trace on that Cayman wire. Whoever is sending Elena money is the real puppet master here. Ray nodded and left. I sat in the silence of my office, staring at the promissory note. 10 years. She'd been holding this over Logan's head for a decade. Was that why he stayed with her? Why he kept coming back? Not love. Debt. I went home that night just after 9. Elena was in the living room, a glass of red wine in her hand, staring at the fireplace. She didn't look up when I walked in. Long day, she asked. Productive. I said. I walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a scotch. Neat. I found Rossi Holdings. Her hand froze midair, the wine glass inches from her lips. She slowly lowered it. What about it? I found the transfers to Green Future now. $200,000. That's a lot of pro bono work. Elena. She set the glass down on the coffee table. Her movements deliberate. It's a private investment. Bullshit. I said, turning to face her. It's a slush fund. And I found the note, the IOU from Logan, $250,000 from 10 years ago. What was that for? Elena? A car? A house? Or was it hush money for something bigger? She stood up. You went through my safe? I didn't need to. I have the original. Filed away in a safety deposit box I pay for. Imagine my surprise when I found it while looking for our marriage certificate. I took a sip of scotch. You've been blackmailing him. Her face paled. I haven't been blackmailing anyone. He owed me. He owes you $250,000. And instead of collecting, you give him $200,000? That's not debt collection. And that's a protection racket. Or maybe you're just in love with the idea of being his white knight. Too bad the horse is lame and the armor is rusted. You don't understand, she hissed. Logan isn't like us. Julian, he doesn't play by the rules of your precious law firm. He's trying to change the world. He's trying to burn it down. I shot back, and you're helping him. Why? Because of a baby that died 10 years ago? Is that worth throwing away your career, your freedom, our marriage? Our marriage died the day you chose this job over everything else. She screamed. You care more about winning cases than you ever cared about me. Logan sees me. He remembers who I was before I became a Vance. Logan remembers who you were because he's still cashing checks from that person. I said coldly, he doesn't love you. Elena, he's using you, just like he used you to lie on the stand. And when the feds come knocking, and they will, he'll roll on you faster than you can say, plea bargain. She took a step toward me, her eyes blazing. If you go after him, I'll deny everything. I'll say you forged a note. I'll say you hacked my accounts. I'll ruin you. Julian, I'll make sure you never practice law in the state again. I laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. You really think the court is going to believe you over me? After I spent an hour yesterday proving you can't tell a Subaru from a Ford? You're done. Elena, your reputation is a joke. And once I introduce that promissory note into evidence, you're not just a liar. You're a co-conspirator. I set my glass down and walked to the stairs. Pack a bag. You're not sleeping in my bedroom tonight. And Elena, if I find one more dollar move between you and Logan Pierce, I'll personally draft the indictment myself. I didn't wait for her response. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. She'd lied to me for years. She'd used our life, our home, our marriage, as a cover for her crimes. I picked up the phone and called Ray. I need you to move faster on the Cayman Trace. And I need a copy of every email, every text, every calendar invite between Elena and Logan Pierce for the last 3 years. Get a subpoena if you have to. And Ray, make sure Marcus Thorne knows we're coming. I want him sweating. I hung up and looked at the framed photo on the nightstand. Our wedding day. Elena smiling, radiant. Me, looking like I own the world. We both look like strangers now. The war wasn't just starting. It was already here. And I was going to burn her world to the ground before she could burn mine. Judge Geller set the hearing for 9 o'clock Monday morning. I arrived early, coffee in hand, and watched the courtroom fill up. Reporters from the Tribune and the Sun-Times were crammed into the back row. Word had gotten out. The wife of a high-profile litigator caught in a perjury mess tied to an eco-terrorism case. Ratings gold. Elena walked in with Marcus Thorne. She wore a steel gray pantsuit today. Her hair pulled back, so tight it looked like it hurt. She didn't look at me. She hadn't looked at me since I found the promissory note. Marcus leaned down, whispered something, and she nodded without expression. Logan Pierce was already at the defense table, looking like he'd slept in his clothes. His public defender was shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Geller banged the gavel. "Mr. Vance, you're recognized." I stood, adjusted my tie, walked to the lectern, though it felt cool under my palms. I didn't look at Elena until I was settled behind the mic. "Mrs. Vance," I said, her name sounding foreign on my tongue. "You previously testified that on the night of October 12th, you observed Mr. Pierce's vehicle near your residence. You described it as a dark green Subaru Outback." Elena finally met my gaze. Her eyes were flat. "That's correct. And you based this identification on a brief glimpse through your kitchen window at approximately midnight?" "Yes." I turned to the court reporter. Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative, then back to her. "Tell me, Mrs. Vance, when you saw this green Subaru, did you also notice the license plate?" Marcus was on his feet. Objection. Aston answered. Overruled. Geller said, "Answer the question." "Mrs. Vance." Elena hesitated. It was too dark to see the plate. Too dark. I repeated. Yet you could identify the make, model, and color of a vehicle 50 yards away in less than 5% moonlight. Remarkable. Are you currently working with the Department of Defense on night vision technology, Mrs. Vance? Or have you perhaps refined your observational skills since your last testimony? A few jurors smirked. Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm a trained attorney," she said, voice icy. "I noticed details. Details like the fact that the police report, entered into evidence last week, lists the suspect vehicle as a black Ford F-150 registered to Green Future now." I paused. "Let it hang. Was the truck camouflaged, Mrs. Vance? Or did you mistake a full-size pickup for a compact SUV because you weren't actually looking out the window?" Objection. Marcus again. Counsel is badgering. Sustained. "Move on. Mr. Vance." I moved to the next exhibit. A blown-up bank statement from Rossi Holdings, LLC. I handed a copy to the bailiff, who passed it to the jury. "Mrs. Vance, do you recognize this document?" She glanced at it. Her composure slipped for half a second. "It appears to be a bank record." "Appears to be," I echoed. "It is a bank record. From Rossi Holdings, LLC, a company registered to your maiden name. Care to explain why this company transferred $20,000 to Green Future Now on September 28th? Marcus stood. "Your Honor." "Relevance?" "Your Honor," I said, turning to Geller. "This goes directly to the witness's bias and motive to fabricate a defense for Mr. Pierce. If she's financially entangled with his organization, her testimony is inherently unreliable." Geller nodded slowly. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully. Julian." I turned back to Elena. "Well, $20,000, 5 days before the fire. Was that a charitable donation? Or a down payment on an alibi? Elena's knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the witness stand. It was a loan. For operational expenses. Operational expenses. I repeated. Like gasoline? Matches? Accelerants? I didn't wait for her to answer. Mrs. Vance, isn't it true that over the past 6 months, Rossi Holdings has transferred a total of $200,000 to Green Future Now? Marcus was up again. Objection. Leading. Overruled. Answer. Elena swallowed hard. Yes, but those were investments. Investments, I said, in a non-profit that's never turned a profit. Curious investment strategy. Mrs. Vance, almost as curious as this. I held up another document, the promissory note. I walked it over to her. Do you recognize this signature? She stared at the paper like it might bite her. It's Logan's. Logan Pierce's. I confirmed. Dated 10 years ago. For $250,000. Payable to you. No interest. Due on demand. I leaned closer to the microphone, lowering my voice so the jury had to lean in. Mrs. Vance, why would a man who claims to hate capitalism owe you $250,000? Silence. Marcus didn't even object this time. He just sat there, watching Elena unravel. He needed the money. She whispered. For what? Tuition? Medical bills? Or maybe to pay off a gambling debt to the outfit? I let that sink in. Isn't it true? Mrs. Vance, that Mr. Pierce has been indebted to you for a decade? And isn't it further true that when he found himself facing arson charges and potential federal investigation into his finances, you decided to help him by any means necessary, including perjury? I didn't what? I cut her off. Didn't lie? Didn't launder money? Didn't spend 10 years holding a promissory note over the head of a man you claim to love? I straightened up. Mrs. Vance, isn't the truth simply this? You weren't protecting Logan Pierce because you love him. You were protecting him because if he goes to prison, your secret loan and your role in helping him move dirty money comes crashing down. You weren't a witness of the defense. Mrs. Vance, you were a co-conspirator trying to save herself. Marcus finally found his voice. Objection. Call for speculation. Sustained, Geller said, but her eyes were locked on Elena. Mrs. Vance, do you have a response? Elena looked at Logan. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the promissory note like it was a death sentence. Elena started. Her voice broke. She cleared her throat. I was trying to protect my husband. Liar, I said quietly. It wasn't loud enough for the court reporter to catch, but she heard it, saw in my eyes. Marcus stood. Your Honor, the defense moves to strike Mrs. Vance's testimony in its entirety. Clearly, her judgment is compromised. Geller rubbed her temples. Granted. Mrs. Vance, you are excused. Mr. Vance, approach. We stepped forward. Geller looked tired. Julian, you just eviscerated your wife on the witness stand, in front of the press, the jury, and God Almighty. You happy? I'm not unhappy. Judge, this case is a mess. I'm declaring a mistrial. Mr. Pierce will be released pending a new trial date. She looked at Marcus. And Marcus? Tell your client if he leaves the county, I'll have his head on a pike. Understand? Marcus nodded grimly. As the jury filed out, Elena stumbled down from the stand. She didn't look at anyone, just walked toward the exit, her heels clicking like a metronome counting down to disaster. I caught up to her in the hallway. Elena. She stopped but didn't turn around. You should get a lawyer, I said. A real one, not Marcus. Someone who understands RICO statutes. She finally turned. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes red. You did this. You did this. I corrected. I just showed everyone who you really are. I loved him. She whispered. You loved the idea of him. I said, the kid who promised you the world and never delivered. But you know what the difference is between Logan and me. Elena, I deliver. And now I'm delivering you to the reality of your choices. I walked away then. Didn't look back. Behind me, I heard her start to cry. Quiet, broken sobs that no one else would hear over the chaos of the courthouse. Back in the gallery, Ray Ortega was waiting. Feds are already here, he said, jerking his chin toward two guys in cheap suits loitering by the water fountain. They're going to want to talk to her about the Cayman wires. Let them, I said. Make sure they get copies of everything we have. And Ray, find out who's really funding Green Future now. Someone with deep pockets is pulling Logan's strings. I want a name. Ray nodded and melted into the crowd. I stepped outside onto Dearborn Street. The sun was too bright. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face. Mr. Vance, any comment on your wife's testimony? I looked at the camera. Justice isn't about who you love. It's about what you can prove. Today, the truth won. Then I turned and walked toward the loop, leaving the wreckage of my marriage behind me. Somewhere in the city, Elena was realizing that her lies hadn't just failed. They destroyed her. And Logan Pierce was realizing that the woman who'd spent a decade covering for him had just been ripped away by her own husband. The game had changed, and I was the only one still playing with a full deck. The FBI came for her at 7 a.m. I heard the knock downstairs. 3 sharp raps that didn't belong to any neighbor or delivery driver. I stayed in bed, listening to Elena's voice, low and controlled, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. Then I heard the words, Special Agent Ramirez, Bureau of Investigation. We have a few questions about Rossi Holdings and Green Future now. I got up, threw on a robe, and leaned over the banister. 2 agents in cheap suits. Elena in her silk pajamas, clutching a mug like it was a shield. She looked up and saw me. Her eyes were hollow. Julian, she said, and there was no anger left in it, just exhaustion. They're here for me. Agent Ramirez looked up, mid-30s, buzz cut, the kind of dead-eyed stare that suggested he'd seen every flavor of human corruption. Mr. Vance, we'll be speaking with your wife. You're welcome to sit in, provided you don't interfere. I wouldn't dream of it. I said. I walked down the stairs slowly. Deliberately, I stopped on the landing, arms crossed. Ellen, you should call your own counsel. Marcus Thorne is a good choice, though he might be a little busy losing the Pierce case. I don't need a lawyer, she whispered. Ramirez sighed. Mrs. Vance, we've traced wire transfers from a Cayman Islands entity, BlackRock Ventures, to Rossi Holdings. Those funds were then routed to Green Future now. We believe this constitutes money laundering, conspiracy, and aiding and abetting a federal fugitive. You have the right to remain silent. He Mirandized her right there in our foyer. The word sounded surreal. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Elena didn't cry. She just swayed slightly, like a tree about to fall. Elena, I said, stepping closer. Tell them about the note. Tell them Logan owed you. Shut up, Vance. Ramirez snapped. She doesn't have to tell us anything. But Elena looked at me. Logan didn't know about the Cayman wires. I did that to protect him. He just needed the money for the organization. The organization that burned down a $500,000 spec home? I asked, that organization? She didn't answer. Ramirez cuffed her gently, but it was still the sound of metal clicking shut, the sound of a life ending. As they let her out, she paused at the door. Julian, the safe deposit box key. It's in the jewelry drawer. There's a letter. For you. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. The house felt too big, too quiet. I went to the kitchen, poured a coffee I didn't want, and sat at the island where she'd lied to me 100 times. I found the key, drove to the bank on Clark Street. The vault smelled like ozone and old paper. Inside the box, the promissory note, a stack of unopened letters from Logan postmarked from various protests, and a single envelope with my name on it in Elena's precise handwriting. I opened in the car. Julian, if you're reading this, it means I'm already caught. I am sorry. Not for Logan. He was never worth it. But for you, I spent 10 years resenting you for being everything I wasn't. Certain, focused, untouchable. I thought if I saved Logan, I could be that too. Instead, I became a cliche. A wife who destroys herself for a ghost. The Cayman money didn't come from Logan. It came from Victor Ricci. Remember him? The developer you sued into bankruptcy 3 years ago? He's the one funding Green Future now. He wanted the arson to look like eco-terrorism, to spike insurance premiums and crash the market. I found out too late. By then, I was in too deep. Logan knew. He was Ricci's pawn. I was just a fool holding the bag. Tell the FBI about Ricci. Use the letters in here. They prove Logan was acting on orders. Maybe it'll buy me a plea deal. Maybe it won't. But you deserve the truth, even if it's too late. Elena, Victor Ricci. The name hit me like a fist. I'd buried that bastard. He'd been a small-time operator then, flipping condos with borrowed money. I'd proven in court he defrauded half of Bridgeport. He'd vowed revenge. And now he'd use Elena to get it. I drove to the federal building on Dearborn, walked past security, past the metal detectors, and asked for Agent Ramirez. He met me in a drab interview room. Elena, sitting on the other side of the glass, staring at nothing. She lawyered up. I asked, "Thorne's on his way." Ramirez said, "Why? You got something else to add to the pile?" I slid the envelope across the table. "Read that, then read the letters. Victor Ricci is your guy. He's been using Green Future now as a front to commit arson for profit. Elena was his accountant. Logan Pierce was his patsy." Ramirez scanned the letter, his expression unchanging. "You expect me to believe this? After you just spent an hour on the stand, making her look like a criminal mastermind?" "I made her look like what she is." I said, "A woman in over her head. But Ricci, he's the one you want. Check the wire transfers. BlackRock Ventures is a Ricci shell. I guarantee it." Ramirez studied me. "Why are you doing this? She lied about you. She cheated on you with this Pierce guy. Now you're handing us the keys to her defense? Because justice isn't about me." I said, "And because Ricci's been a cancer in this city for too long. Elena's punishment will come. Losing her career, her reputation, her freedom. That's enough. But Ricci, he needs to go down for the arson, for the insurance fraud, for using my wife as a pawn in his revenge fantasy." Ramirez nodded slowly. "We'll verify this. If you're lying, I'm not." I said, "But ask Elena about the night of the fire. Ask her who called Logan at 10:47 p.m. It wasn't me. It was Ricci. Tell her you know about the Cayman connection. Watch her face. She'll break." I left him there, walked out into the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed. Marcus Thorne. "Vance, what the hell did you just give Ramirez?" "The truth." I said, "Something you should try sometime." "Marcus, you're screwing with the case. Elena's my client now. If you tampered with her—" "I didn't tamper." I said, "I just handed you a defense. Ricci's the architect. Logan's the fall guy. Elena's the dupe. Run with it. Or don't. But if you try to bury this to save your own reputation, I'll make sure the AG knows exactly where the bodies are buried." I hung up, kept walking, past the Daily Center, past the Picasso statue, past the tourists taking selfies. None of it felt real. I'd won. Idea expusa Elena. Destroyed her credibility. And now I was handing her a lifeline, not because I loved her, because I respected the law, and because Victor Ricci had made this personal long before Elena ever got involved. My phone buzzed again. Ray Ortega. "Julian, Ricci just boarded a private jet at Midway. Flight plan filed for Nassau. Pull the flight plan." I said, "Call the FAA. Tell them the passenger is a material witness in a federal arson investigation. Ground that plane." "On it." Ray said, "But Julian, you realize what you're doing? You're burning every bridge you have left. The Ricci family won't forget this. Let them remember." I said, "And Ray, call Elena's new lawyer. Tell him to push for a proffer session. She talks. We get Ricci. She walks with a misdemeanor. Make it happen." I hung up and kept walking, toward the lake. The wind off the water was cold. I thought about Elena in a holding cell, about Logan Pierce realizing he'd been played, about Victor Ricci being dragged off a tarmac in handcuffs. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not forgiveness. Just the quiet knowledge that the truth, messy, painful, and incomplete, had finally won, even if it had cost me everything. 6 months later, the courtroom felt smaller. Same pews, same flickering fluorescence, same smell of burnt coffee. But the cast had changed. Victor Ricci sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking less like a kingpin and more like a guy who'd aged a decade in custody. Logan Pierce was across the aisle, clean-shaven, wearing a navy blazer that didn't fit right. And Elena was at the prosecution table, next to Marcus Thorne, and a DOJ attorney in a crisp blue suit. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She hadn't looked at me since the proffer session, where she laid out Ricci's entire operation in exchange for immunity on the arson charge. She'd pleaded guilty to misprision of felony and filing false financial reports, 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and permanent disbarment, the price of survival. Judge Geller entered, and the room rose. She looked older, too. The bench had hardened her. "Be seated," she said. "Mr. Ricci, the jury has returned a verdict. Clerk, please publish." The clerk stood. "In the matter of the United States versus Victor Ricci, on the count of conspiracy to commit arson, guilty. On the count of wire fraud, guilty. On the count of racketeering, guilty. On the count of witness tampering, guilty." Ricci didn't react, just stared at the American flag behind Geller's head. His lawyer started whispering frantically, but Ricci waved him off. Geller looked down at the sentencing guidelines. "Mr. Ricci, you turned the tragic act of eco-terrorism into a profit center. You use a vulnerable young man and a desperate woman to line your pockets and settle a petty vendetta against Mr. Vance here." She nodded toward me. "You are a blight on this city. I hereby sentence you to 22 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You will forfeit all assets tied to BlackRock Ventures and Green Future Now. Bailiff, remove him." As the marshals led Ricci away, he finally spoke. Just 2 words, directed at me. "You're next." I didn't respond, just watched him go. He wasn't next. He was finished. Geller turned to Logan Pierce. "Mr. Pierce, you were a pawn, a misguided, arrogant pawn, but you were aware of the fraud, and you accepted the funds. You will serve 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 3 years probation. And Mr. Pierce, stay away from my courtroom, and stay away from Mrs. Vance." Logan nodded, his face pale. He'd lost everything: his cause, his freedom, and the woman who'd spent a decade cleaning up his messes. Then Geller looked at Elena. "Mrs. Vance, or should I say, Ms. Rossi, your cooperation was substantial, but your betrayal of your oath and your husband cannot go unpunished. The terms of your plea are incorporated into this judgment. You will surrender your law license today. You will complete your service and probation, and you will reflect on the damage you caused." Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. The sound echoed. Elena stood, gathered her things, and finally looked at me. Her eyes were dry, but bloodshot. She mouthed something. "Thank you," or maybe "I'm sorry." I didn't care enough to interpret it. Marcus Thorne stepped over, clapping me on the shoulder. "Hell of a ride. Vance, you took down Ricci, saved the DOJ's case, and managed to keep your own nose clean. ARDC closed your file, right? Last week." I said, "Lack of probable cause. Turns out recording your wife's confession to the FBI isn't unethical conduct. It's just good lawyering." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Elena's moving to Phoenix, staying with her sister. New name, new start." "Good," I said. "Keep her away from the lakefront. I don't want to see her." I walked out, past the reporters who'd given up on me weeks ago. The sun was setting over the loop, painting the Willis Tower orange. I headed to the Palmer House bar, slid onto a stool, and ordered a Maker's Mark. Neat. The bartender, a kid with a nose ring, gnawed the glass toward me. "Rough day?" "End of one," I said. I drank it slow. Around me, the city hummed. Cabs honked. Tourists laughed. A street musician played a saxophone version of Sweet Home Chicago. Life went on. Mine didn't feel like mine anymore. The house in Winnetka was on the market. The furniture was in storage. I'd rented a loft in River North. All concrete and steel. Nothing soft to remind me of what I'd lost. Mind if I sit? I looked up. Ray Ortega, holding a beer. I nodded. He sat, took a long pull, and sighed. Ricci's people are already talking retribution. You might want to vary your routine. Let them, I said. They're all in prison or on probation. Ricci's the last of the old guard. Once he's gone, the rest scatter. You okay, Julian? Really? I swirled the whiskey. Define okay. I'm not married anymore. I'm not a partner at the firm. Resigned last month. I'm not even sure I like practicing law. But I'm free. And I'm sober. And I'm not cleaning up after someone else's lies. Ray nodded. You gonna stay in Chicago? For now. Might teach. Might consult. Might just drink whiskey and watch the river flow backward. I finished the glass. Set it down. You know what the worst part is? What? She meant it when she wrote that letter. She was sorry. Not for the lying. For getting caught. For dragging me into Ricci's web. She spent 10 years trying to be the hero in Logan's story. And she ended up the villain in mine. And I spent 10 minutes on a witness stand making sure everyone knew it. You did what you had to do. Ray said, yeah. I said, I did. And that's the problem. I didn't hesitate. Not once. Not when I filed a motion. Not when I cross-examined her. Not when I handed the FBI the keys to her cell. I just acted like a machine. You're a lawyer. Julian, it's what we do. I stood up, left a 20 on the bar. No, it's what I did. I'm done being a weapon. From now on, I'm just a man. I walked out into the night. The air was cold, biting. I pulled my coat tighter and headed north, toward the river. I didn't look back at the bar, or the courthouse, or the life I'd left behind. Ahead, the lights of the magnificent mile glittered, fake and bright. Behind me, the city whispered stories agreed, love and betrayal. Mine was just another one, but it was finished. I stopped at the bridge, watched the water churn below. Somewhere, Elena was on a plane to Arizona. Logan was processing his surrender. Ricci was counting ceiling tiles in a cell. And I was standing alone in the dark, breathing air that didn't taste like lies. I turned and walked east, toward the lake. The wind picked up, sharp with the promise of snow. Winter was coming, but for the first time in a long time, I welcomed it. Cold was honest. Cold didn't pretend. Cold just was. And so was I.